Storytime about how I paid off my husband's debt and then he confessed that he had an affair with my sister. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. By the way, if you want longer, spicier story time, subscribe to the podcast. Link in bio. My deadbeat husband is just that. He went to film school and incurred a bunch of debt. I, on the other hand, became a successful lawyer. But at the beginning, it was actually kind of good. He was funny, really charming. He was the first guy that ever really made me laugh. And this was so important to me, because if you can't make me laugh, I'm gonna be bored. When we first started dating, we were both completely broke. So at that point, we were on an even keel. Neither one of us was making more money than the other. But at the time, we did not have a mortgage, and he was not yet in film school. When we both graduated school, I was able to get a really high-paying job. And with that money, I paid off my student loans. Whereas my husband struggled to become the famous filmmaker he wanted to become. You see, he thought he was gonna be the next Chris Nolan, and that did not happen. 5 years later, he was still struggling. He was making short films here and there, but to be honest, they were kind of crappy. And he always needed money. And guess who gave it to him? His successful lawyer of a wife. You know what? Yeah, I'm an enabler. Shouldn't have given him all the money he asked for. But the thing is, I thought I was advancing his career. I thought of it as an investment. But the situation became absolutely torturous last year. We wanted to buy a house, but he had a lot of debt, which meant he wasn't able to get a loan. This meant I was going to be 100% responsible for paying the house. That's when I decided to pay off his debt. This way we could both go in on a loan together so that we could get a better rate. And when I broke the news to him that I would pay off his loans, his face completely lit up. He started jumping up and down, thanking me. But of course, I wasn't going to give it to him for free. He needed to pay me back. And he said that he would within the next 10 years. Yeah, right. We jump on the laptop, I pay off his loans. That's when he starts to cry like a baby. I asked him what was wrong, and then he just blurted it out. I had an affair with your sister last year. I'm so sorry. Apparently, the guilt had been eating at him, and now that I paid off his loan, he felt even worse. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how I paid off my husband's debt and then he confessed that he had an affair with my sister. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. And if you want longer, spicier story time, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. And it's totally free. Link in bio. As he's crying like a baby, he confesses that he had an affair with my sister. He says it only happened once while I was away on a business trip. This is what he said happened. Years ago, my parents were getting their house renovated. So my parents and my sister came to stay at our apartment. During that time, I had a very important business trip. I was only gone for 3 nights. He says my parents went out to dinner, so him and my sister stayed alone in the apartment. And before he knew it, my sister threw herself on him. And he just couldn't say no because he felt bad about rejecting her. You heard that right, that was his excuse. I immediately call my sister up and she answers the phone. And when I ask her about it, she starts crying and tells me right then and there that they had been having an affair for 2 months. So no, it wasn't just a one-night thing. Apparently they both felt really bad about it though, but not bad enough to stop after one night. So I kicked him out. Because he has no money, he went back to live with his parents. I told my parents about my sister and they stopped paying for her tuition. So guess what? She had to get a job to pay for school. Okay, this is the part where you're gonna think I'm so stupid. I actually don't know if I should divorce my husband. I'm afraid he's gonna try to take all my money. And also, I still kind of love him. That's stupid, right? Self-care. I accidentally cheated on my boyfriend with my crush. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send to me on Instagram. And if you want more story time, subscribe to my YouTube channel. My boyfriend is the definition of tall, dark, and handsome. Here's a little backstory. We met through friends and he's been chasing me for months. We met at my best friend's birthday dinner. And that very same night, he asked me out. At first, I thought he was being super aggressive, but then I found out that he'd had a crush on me for months now. Apparently, he'd seen me on my bestie's Instagram. And since then, which was months ago, he kept asking my bestie to set us up. But bestie knew that I was not looking for a boyfriend. Okay, so there's this guy that I had a crush on. He and I worked together and he was in charge of training me. After a week, I literally fell in love. But that's when I found out he had a girlfriend. And believe it or not, I was actually heartbroken. This led me to swearing off men. I really just wanted to focus on myself. I did not want to go on dates. I deleted all my apps. And that's why my bestie never told me about this guy. Okay, so fast forward a few months. I meet my now boyfriend at dinner. Like I said, he was aggressive. Then my bestie told me why. So I decided to give him a chance. This man was so devoted to me. He took me on a date every day for 2 weeks. By the end of the 2 weeks, he asked me to be his girlfriend. And how could I say no? In this dating economy, what man is going to plan 2 weeks worth of dates and pay for everything and be attractive and treat you like a queen? Then guess what? Next day I show up to work. My crush tells me that he found his girlfriend cheating on him and that he liked me. Go to part 2. I accidentally cheated on my new boyfriend with my old crush. Disclaimer, is now my story time. Send me on Instagram. And if you want more story times, follow me on YouTube. The very next day after my new boyfriend asks me to be his girlfriend, I show up to work and my crush tells me that his girlfriend cheated on him and that she broke up with him. And then he confesses that he's had a crush on me since I started working there, but that he never acted on his feelings because he had a girlfriend and he thought that she was being faithful to him. That's when he came in for a kiss and I let him do it.
Okay, so here's where I messed up. I completely forgot that I had a boyfriend and that he had just spent 2 weeks wooing me, taking me out to lunch, whining and dining me every single day for the past 2 weeks. Yeah, that guy, I completely forgot he existed. I was so excited about my crush liking me back that my new boyfriend just slipped my mind. After he kissed me, he said, "I know you've liked me too." And so I told him that I did like him too. That's when he asked me if I wanted to go get lunch together, and we did. And we had a magical time. And because there was all this pent-up tension between us, stuff happened in his car, and throughout all of this, I still didn't remember my boyfriend. Not until he sends me a text message asking me if I needed a ride home. He knew my car was getting fixed and I was relying on Ubers. I mean, could this guy be any more perfect? And here I am sitting in my crush's car. But it gets worse. I tell him, sure, come pick me up from work and take me home. But when he does, my crush sees me getting into the car with him. Go to part 3. I accidentally cheated on my new boyfriend with my old crush. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's on me on Instagram. If you want more story times, follow me on YouTube. So after I've cheated on my boyfriend, he comes to pick me up from work to take me home. And when I'm getting into my boyfriend's car, my crush, who is my coworker who I just happened to hook up with, sees me getting into my boyfriend's car. Of course, my boyfriend and I drive off, thank God. This man texted me right away and said, "You didn't tell me you had a boyfriend." My stomach drops instantly. He's right. I didn't tell him that I had a boyfriend. Because at the time that I was hooking up with him, I didn't even remember I had a boyfriend. Remember, my boyfriend had asked me to be his girlfriend just the day before. He was so angry, he sent me another message. It said, "Don't talk to me again. I'm blocking you. And I'm going to try to get you transferred to another location." I could not speak. I just burst into tears. My boyfriend, who's sitting right next to me, asks me what's going on. And that's when I confessed it to him. I told him that I accidentally hooked up with my coworker, who I'd had a crush on. That's when he stops the car and demands that I get out. He said my coworker did the right thing. Then he told me to delete his number and just drove away. So not only did I lose my new boyfriend, but also the crush that I'd been crushing on for months. So I did the logical thing. Showed up to my boyfriend's apartment that night and begged him to take me back. After 5 hours of discussing everything, he finally agreed to giving me another chance. Do I deserve this? Or am I just the most horrible person ever? Bye. I fell in love with my sister's boyfriend by mistake, and now I don't know what to do. Am I wrong for this? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. All of this started when my sister wanted me to help her figure out if her boyfriend would ever cheat on her. Now, me being the best sister in the world that I am, I said of course. We opened up a fake Instagram. Then we uploaded pictures for 2 months. We were so invested in this. We even found a girl that lived an hour away and asked her to send us pictures. And of course, we paid her for it. So we basically had this real account. Then my sister told me one day she was ready for me to start sending messages to him through that account. And when I did, he started messaging back, like almost right away. The things he was saying to this girl were so sweet. It was basically like he was just trying to get to know her. I went along with it for a week. But this is when I realized that every time he'd message me, my heart would start pounding and I'd get really excited. By the end of the week, I just realized that I started catching feelings for him. The job my sister asked me to do, I was doing. And in the process, I was falling in love. I was confused and terrorized by my own feelings. I felt guilty, and honestly, I felt really bad for my sister because he was also cheating on her. He wasn't saying anything vulgar, by the way, but he was definitely being super sweet. I decided to wait a whole other week to tell my sister. This meant that for another week, I was messaging him like I was this other girl. And he started wanting to talk on the phone. So I literally got on the phone with him. I changed my voice slightly and we were talking every single night. He would call me and we'd talk for about half an hour. And during these conversations, we just got to know each other. I felt sick in the head. Mind you, my sister's in the bedroom next to mine. While he was telling my sister that he had to go to bed early for work, he was on the phone with me. By the end of the second week, I knew my time was up. I had all the evidence and I needed to show it to my sister. I waited for her to come home, but only to see that she came with her boyfriend. I nearly passed out when I saw him come into the house. I had the craziest butterflies. He came up and hugged me like he usually does. Except this time, I was totally in love. Little did he know that I'd been the one he'd been talking to this whole time. But as soon as he left, I told my sister everything. My sister read those messages for hours. Go to part 2. I fell in love with my sister's boyfriend by mistake. Am I wrong for this? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was an on Instagram. I had been pretending to be somebody else on Instagram to catch him cheating. And it worked. But I fell in love with him in the process. But nonetheless, I told my sister everything. I showed her all the messages that he had been sending this account. It was 2 weeks worth of messages, so my sister read them for hours, crying the entire time. She was completely beside herself. And the whole time, I'm suffering with her too. She is my sister, but I'm also in love with her boyfriend. I also felt like I was technically the other girl.
I asked my sister to take a break from looking at the messages, and she did. With tears in her eyes, she looks at me and says, "I feel so guilty because I cheated first." Then she started confessing that she only set him up to see if he would cheat on her because she felt guilty that she cheated first. And I want to know what you guys think. Do you think it's cheating if he was talking to another girl on Instagram? Even though it wasn't inappropriate, it was just kind and sweet. Apparently, she hooked up with one of our neighbors. She says it only happened once and she feels really guilty about it. She made me swear I would never tell, but I couldn't help it. I texted my sister's boyfriend anonymously telling him that he got cheated on. He confronted my sister right away, and she just broke down and started to cry. Then she told him about the fake account and that it was all me, and now he won't talk to me. They actually ended up breaking up. I want to text him so bad and tell him that I love him. What should I do? Self-care sister out.
Storytime about how I dated my mom's graper. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and trigger warning for grape. I had a very charmed upbringing. My parents were both independently wealthy and pretty much gave me everything I ever wanted. I'm also an only child, so I got their attention constantly. When I was 17, my mom and dad started having problems, and the only reason I found out is because I would hear them arguing from time to time. But in front of me, they always made the effort to be kind to each other. About a year later, I met this really cute guy at the gym. He made every effort to talk to me for about a week. Finally, after a week, he asked me out on a date, and I said yes. He was extremely charming, good-looking, handsome, kind, intelligent, everything you could ever want in a man. And did I mention that he was a very successful businessman? He had a house in Aspen, one in California, and properties all over Texas. We dated for 2 months, and all I really noticed was that he was very jealous. If he caught a guy looking at me, he would get very upset. He was very territorial, and at first I thought this just meant that he loved me. Do you see where this is going? To confuse you some more, 6 months before I met this guy, my mom had been raped. It happened while she was showing some property. The guy was never caught. My mom spent about a week in the hospital. She became a recluse. She went to live in a cabin that my dad and her owned. Well, during Christmas, I decided to take my boyfriend to this cabin. Go to part 2.
Storytime about how I dated my mom's graper. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and trigger warning for grape. After my mom got graped, she became a recluse and went to live in this really fancy cabin her and my dad owned. And like I said, I started dating this guy, and it was right around Christmas. So I decided to take him to meet my parents at the cabin. Like I said, my mom was a recluse, and she just wasn't the same after the grape, which of course I completely understand. It was a very traumatic thing that she went through. So when I brought my boyfriend at the time over, I could tell there was something up. She tried to stay away from him, didn't talk to him, and basically wouldn't even look him in the eye. The day after he and I arrived, she asked me if we could leave. I was extremely offended. I didn't understand why she didn't like him, and she wouldn't tell me. I even got into a huge argument with my mom defending him. My boyfriend actually left earlier, and that's when my mom told me everything. My boyfriend was her graper. It all started when she had an affair with him. The affair lasted 2 months, and when she broke it off, he became obsessed. He followed her everywhere, called her every single day, and I remember that my parents had changed their phone number, and I couldn't figure out why. My mom and I were both in tears. I came to the realization that I had done it with my mom's graper, and my mom was still dealing with her own trauma. We decided to tell my dad the truth. When we all went to confront him, his house was empty. There were no signs of him. He changed his number, and we never saw him again. We keep getting phone calls though, and I think it's him. He used me to get close to my mom. What should I do? My father-in-law is forcing my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time, and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup today. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. Now, we did get married very, very young. By very young, I mean I was 18 and he was 19. When we started dating in high school, his dad was totally against the relationship. See, my husband was super popular. He played on the football team. All the girls chased him. He also played basketball and was perfect at everything he did. As you can imagine, was extremely strict with him. He was not even allowed to go out on weekends. Me, on the other hand, my parents are pretty much hippies. They let me do whatever I want. We're all very spiritual. My parents have full trust in me. Because of this, I make smart decisions. I actively seek my parents' advice. I even told my parents I lost my virginity when I did. And we had a big conversation about it. It was not dramatic. It was not like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. They just support me in everything I do. Now, my husband's parents are not the same. They tell him not to do a lot of things. They try to control him. So as we were dating in high school, his dad kept telling him to break up with me. He claimed that I was holding him back and that because of me, he spent less time training. Which technically, yes, is true. But at the same time, you cannot stop your son from experiencing human relationships. In fact, he actually broke up with me for 2 weeks. But then we got back together in secret. Everything culminated when he asked me to marry him right after graduation. His parents were absolutely against it. But my parents were all for it. You guessed it, go to part 2. My father-in-law wants my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time, and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. When he asked me to marry him right out of high school, his parents absolutely freaked. They went to my parents' house and told me off for saying yes. In other words, they were completely blaming me for the whole thing, as if their own son didn't go buy a ring and ask me to marry him. Even did a beautiful proposal, which he had been planning for months. But at this point, his parents didn't even know that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. When they came to my house, his mom, my now mother-in-law, started crying and yelling at me. She told told me that I was ruining their family, that I was trying to steal her son, and that all I really cared about was their money. By the way, my parents were middle class, but we were not destitute. His parents are very rich. They own several businesses. But of course, I'm not after their money. That's when they said that if we did end up getting married, I would have to sign a prenup. Duh, I said, yeah, I want to marry him because I'm in love. At this point, his parents knew they couldn't stop us. We were going to get married with or without their approval. But thankfully, his parents came around and let us get married. We had a quaint, small wedding. It was so magical. But his parents wanted him to go to college to play football. In other words, they wanted him to be the next Tom Brady. They made him train for hours, and they didn't even let us live together for the first year we were married. And because they were supporting him, he couldn't say no. They had us on a schedule. Could only see him for about 2 to 3 hours a day. And we were married. 2 years later, he's playing for a football team. But his parents keep thinking that I'm dragging him down. So now they're trying to convince him to leave me. Go to part 3. My father-in-law is trying to convince my husband to divorce me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and this is the final part of the 3-part story time, doing a full face of pink makeup. After a year of us being married, his parents did not allow us to live together because he needed to focus on football. So obviously, I was living with my parents. I was focusing on my own studies, but his parents did allow us to see each other 2 to 3 hours a day. Now, you might think my husband is a total pushover, but let me explain something. His parents paid for all of his training and his entire college tuition. They gave him the best of everything. He got sports massages every single day. They even installed a cold plunge in their backyard. They also had a full gym setup where he and his teammates would go work out every single day. In their house. Obviously, he did not have time for little old me. After a year of this, I couldn't take anymore. I wanted to be with my husband. So I gave him an ultimatum. That he tell his parents that he and I wanted to live together. That's all I wanted. I was even willing to pay for half of the rent. And he told his parents, they said fine. And they bought us a house. Obviously under my husband's name, not mine. Fast forward another year up until now. I've heard his dad tell him on several occasions that he needs to divorce me. That he could find a much prettier wife once he becomes bigger in the NFL. And I walked in on his mom telling him that maybe I can't even have kids. And that he should have me checked. My parents-in-law hate me. I sometimes feel like I am holding him back. They make us miserable. My parents think I should just walk away from the marriage, but I'm too in love. Should I confront my parents-in-law? Help me think of what I should say to them. I think my boyfriend is a narcissist. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. Brace yourselves because this is one messed up story. 5 months ago, my bestie and I show up to this party. Think really rich people living in the Hamptons. A la Great Gatsby, but with TikTok and cell phones. My bestie and I look fabulous. Out of nowhere, this guy comes up to me and starts talking to me like he knew me. I was actually confused. I thought maybe we had met before and I was embarrassed that I didn't recognize him. So I entertained him for about 10 minutes. That's when he told me that he lied. That he'd never met me before, but he was pretending so that he could actually talk to me. I was actually charmed. You see, he's English, and he was in town for about a week visiting his friends, the very rich people who were hosting the party. He charmed me so much that night. By the end of the party, he started love bombing me. No, I didn't know he was doing it at the time. He was giving me every single compliment he could think of. How pretty I was, how beautiful my hair was, how I was the prettiest girl in the entire party. They were very generic compliments, but he still managed to charm me. That's when he said, "Can I kiss you?" I said no, and then he kissed me. I was stunned, but I kind of liked it. For the rest of that week, he started showing up everywhere I was. After about 2 weeks, he convinced me to be his girlfriend. But then he started making me feel bad for the people I was hanging out with. You see, I have a lot of guy friends, and he would say things like, "If you love me, you wouldn't be hanging out with all these guys." And the love bombing continued every single day, every hour of the day. He worshipped me. Before I knew it, I was prioritizing him and only him. I stopped hanging out with friends, and he started criticizing my appearance and changing the way that I was dressing. Then one day he told me that I was stupid for not realizing that he was lying to me all the time. When I asked him what he meant, he said, "Wow, then you really are stupid." 2 days later, I found out he's not even English. He's from Ohio. Everything he said is a lie. Then he love bombs me and follows it up with criticism. And when it comes to intimacy, it makes me feel like I'm not good enough, but then he always wants it. And last night he told me that he's more attractive than I am. And if that bothers me, can someone tell me what a narcissist actually is? I think I'm right about this. What should I do? Self-care sister out. I told my best friend that her fiance was cheating on her and she did not believe me. Disclaimer, this is my story. I was 20 years old. I moved to LA. I was trying to make friends as quickly as possible. Good friends, not backstabbers. At my new job, I met this girl, and she was kind of similar to me, but she was the type of person that trusted everybody. Right away, she started trusting me. She was just really kind. Started hanging out outside of work, and it was really nice because she liked to cook, and so did I. She would come over to my place, and we would make some food and just watch movies. After a couple of weeks, I met her fiance, and I hated him right away. All he did was stare at me. What do you do when you meet your bestie's fiance and all he does is stare at you? It's disgusting. At first, I thought he was kind of joking, but then I realized he was being super serious. He was trying to make cute eyes at me. So after that, I would never look him straight in the eye. I knew that's what he wanted, so I just wouldn't do it. That's when I started being really vigilant. I started noticing every single little red flag about him. One day, my bestie invites me over to a barbecue at her place, and after a couple of hours, I wanted to leave. Everyone at this point had had so many drinks, I was the only person that was sober. I go into her bedroom, and I find her with her sister. Part
Part 2 is I told my best friend that her fiance was cheating on her and she did not believe me. Disclaimer, this is my story time. I walk into their bedroom and I see her fiance with my best friend's sister. What I actually saw was just him kissing her neck. But why is your fiance kissing your sister's neck? And as soon as they saw me, they freaked. They jumped up really quick. He ran out of the bedroom and then he just stared at me. Like he always does, just staring. I ran to my bestie and I told her everything. By the way, everyone at this point had had so many drinks. I was actually the only sober person at this party. What happened next was a nightmare. My bestie turns to me and tells me to leave the party. She told me that I was just jealous of her relationship, that I was projecting on her. She throws my purse at me and I leave. I cried so much, I was mortified. She was so desperate to make her relationship work. Okay, by the way, her sister actually lived with them at the time. This girl had no money and no job. My best friend supported her in every single way possible. Her and I obviously didn't speak after that until 6 months later. She calls me on the phone in tears. Then she tells me she finds out her sister is pregnant. Her fiance is leaving her for her sister, and they are kicking her out of her apartment, the one she paid half for. I remember this because he actually followed me on Instagram 2 days ago. Should I be petty? Self-care sister out. I caught my boyfriend trying to hire an escort. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story time. My boyfriend and I have been together 2 years. We met on Bumble and we've been inseparable ever since. I will admit that at the beginning of the relationship, he sort of manipulated me. Made me think that he did want a serious relationship, but he wouldn't commit. It's totally different now when he even begged for me to move in with him 2 months ago. Now he's very wealthy. Not only is his family extremely rich, but he actually started his own businesses and is independently wealthy. I'm also independently wealthy as I own 2 businesses. He's paying for all the bills, but I did offer to help him and he said no. I still often pay for groceries and sometimes I pay for dinner when we go out together. Here's the thing. We've trusted each other throughout our relationship because we're both confident people. I've never had a problem with him cheating. I've never cheated on him. Because of this, my boyfriend leaves his phone around me all the time. I said I moved in with him and things were great. We were about to watch a movie and he asked me to order Postmates on his phone. I get on his phone and I see an app I don't recognize. Out of curiosity, I click on it. I knew right away it was an escort account. I see a bunch of profiles of very beautiful women and one unread message. I open it and it says, "I'll see you tomorrow night at 6. Thanks for the $4,000. Part 2 is up. I caught my boyfriend trying to hire an escort. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story. That's when I see the message that says, "Thanks for the $4,000. My stomach dropped and I felt ill. I couldn't see any other messages on the app, luckily, but I went and confronted him. He instantly apologized and said that it was only because I couldn't fulfill certain fantasies he had. What I'm about to say is either him telling me the truth or him gaslighting me. You decide. He said that because I am not submissive, he has a hard time feeling satisfied, if you know what I mean. He also told me that I have a lot of masculine energy, even though I'm a very feminine woman, that because I earn my own money, he feels like he's not male enough for me, and that he wishes I would just let him do whatever he wanted. He told me his intention was just to take this girl out, that he could feel like an alpha. Apparently, he asked her to be very submissive, and she agreed, and that they would only have dinner. He even told me that he still wants to go on the date. I basically ran away from his apartment, and my best friend told me that this is wrong, that I should break up with him. But maybe I am too masculine. Should I let him go on the date, or should I leave him? What do you guys think? Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, "Wow, you're growing into your body," or "Wow, you got great hips." He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, "Oh, you know how he is." So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events.
dress. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. That's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting, and that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.
My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her one bit. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year. When I met him, he already had a very big group of best friends. One of them was this girl. There's actually another girl in the group, but my boyfriend and this particular girl, let's call her Lacey. Lacey is completely obsessed with my boyfriend. I tell him all the time, but he doesn't want to listen to me. She goes out of her way to spend time with him, and she'll do girlfriend things for him. Sometimes she'll call him and say, I cooked us dinner, come over to my apartment. She even goes to his apartment and helps him do laundry. Let me go back though. When we started dating, he asked me not to be uncomfortable and that him and her were only good friends. But as soon as I saw them with each other, it was visible that she was in love with him. When he first brought me around to meet his friends, she was super territorial. She would sit next to him and even sat on his lap in front of me. And this made my boyfriend uncomfortable. He asked her to sit on a chair instead of his lap. After that, I asked him if he had feelings for her and he said no. He said he's only ever seen her as a sister, that the thought of hooking up with her makes him want to vomit. Lacey reached out to me and asked me to have lunch with her. Throughout the whole lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend, and how amazing he is, and how only a good girl deserves him. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, I was sending me on Instagram. And her and I went to lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend. That's when she started saying things like, he only deserves a really good girl. That's when I was straight up with her. I told her that he had already chosen me because he loved me, and that I didn't need her to tell me what my boyfriend needed. You guys should have seen the look on this girl's face. She was shocked that I would defend myself and even talk back to her. Then she said, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I told her that I didn't feel bad, and that I knew what she was doing. She was basically trying to intimidate me and make me feel that I wasn't good enough for my boyfriend. She denied it and started apologizing, but at least I made it clear to her that I was not stupid and that she was not going to walk all over me like she probably did with all of his exes. By the way, one of his past girlfriends actually broke up with her because of this girl. I mean, Lacey. Found this out through one of the other friends. They told me that I needed to be careful with her. That's why I was prepared to go to lunch with her. Guess what happened though? I called my boyfriend to say hi to him, and that's when he starts yelling at me. He said Lacey called him to tell him that I had attacked her at lunch, that I basically threatened her. I explained to him what happened from my point of view, and he said that she was probably just overreacting. But it was her word against mine. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I do not trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. After Lacey told my boyfriend that I had attacked her and threatened her, he told me to keep my distance. So I did. But that meant that he would hang out with her without me. I found this completely unacceptable. That's when I told my boyfriend that she was manipulative, that she had clearly planned everything out so that he and her could be alone. Then I told him that his ex-girlfriend left him because of her. He told me that I didn't know the full story and that I should mind my own business. That's when I noticed that he wouldn't come over to my apartment every day. And guess why? His best friend Lacey told him that she had a stalker and that she needed my boyfriend to stay over her house so that she could feel protected and safe. I just can't. I told him that she was clearly manipulating him and probably lying about the stalker situation so that he could spend more time with her. And just like that, 2 days later, he told me that they were moving in together and that she miraculously found an apartment big enough for the two of them. In 2 days? I don't think so. I think she had been planning this the whole time, and my boyfriend is just stupid enough to fall for it. I told him if he moved in with her that he should just forget about me. He begged me not to leave him, so I guess I'm still his girlfriend. He's still debating whether or not to move in with her. He says he doesn't want to lose me, but he wants to be able to be there for her. I think I should break up with him, but maybe there's another solution. What do you guys think I should do?
I hid under my boyfriend's bed for 2 days and tried to poison him. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 3 months. And when we started dating, I got really jealous. He was my first boyfriend and I just didn't know how to control my feelings. You can say I'm pretty toxic. Part of the reason why I'm so insecure is because my boyfriend is probably one of the most popular guys in school. He's a basketball player and he's about to be drafted. So all the girls are constantly trying to hook up with him. And this drives me insane. Whenever we go out, girls are falling over trying to get to him. A few weeks ago, I heard a rumor that my boyfriend had hooked up with a girl. When I asked him about it, he got really defensive. He got so angry he punched a hole in my wall. And well, this made me start thinking, maybe he was cheating on me. So I basically started stalking him. And that's what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks. I'm even skipping class just to go wherever he's going. That's when I decided that I would hide in his room. I even put on a diaper. Part 2 is up. Put on the diaper so that I could hide under my boyfriend's bed without having to get out. Disclaimer is not my story time, was sending me on Instagram. I even took soft food with me so that he wouldn't hear me chewing. I knew he wouldn't be home, so I snuck into his dorm room. That's when I checked his entire room. I went through all of his clothes, even went through all of his dirty laundry just to smell them and make sure he didn't have anything in his pockets. Searched in between the mattresses and I found nothing. At this point, I was just looking for a sign of him having hooked up with somebody. I knew he was going to be coming home soon, so I snuck under the bed. It was pretty hidden underneath there because it's a huge bed. He came in by himself and started changing and went to take a shower. But he took his phone with him into the bathroom, so I didn't have a chance to check it. By the way, he thought that I had gone home to my parents' house, so he wasn't going to be hanging out with me at all. As he was getting ready, he put on cologne, and that's when I knew he was going to go look for another girl. A few hours later, he comes back and I'm still underneath the bed. And guess what? He's with a girl. The same girl I heard the rumor about. They come in there laughing and I can tell that they're clearly drunk. This girl goes to the bathroom and changes into lingerie. And then they started making out on the bed while I'm hiding underneath it. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is making out with this girl on his bed. I'm hiding underneath it. Suddenly, she starts talking about how she's so happy they're finally a couple. How she's so happy he got away from me since I was such a crazy ex. Clearly, my boyfriend had been poisoning me against her. That's when I realized I really couldn't blame the girl. My boyfriend had clearly told her that he had broken up with me and that now he was with her. My plan was to initially get out of the bed and surprise them, but instead, I decided to wait. I managed to set up my phone while they were doing it on the bed, and I recorded the entire thing. After they finally finish, she leaves. My boyfriend goes to take a shower, and I finally come out underneath the bed. And I sit on his bed. And the look on this man's face when he comes out of the bathroom, priceless. But the best part is that I was filming the entire thing. At this point, I was still wearing the diapers because I had been under his bed for 2 days. I'm obviously looking rough. Then I tell him that I've been under his bed for the entire 2 days. He started calling me crazy and he tried to kick me out. Then I told him that he needs to break up with the girl and come back with me. If he didn't, I would send the video around to the entire school, including his coach, who is the girl's dad. I got him pretty good. So now he's still my boyfriend, although it's forced, to get back at him somehow. I'll keep you guys updated. Bye. The asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother. A month ago, I borrowed my mom's phone and she had no idea, but I looked at all of her apps and found that she was cheating with multiple men. I'm 26 years old and my parents have now been married for 30 years. I actually got separated when I graduated from high school, but then they got back together a few years later. My mom has always been the one that wants to separate my dad, but he keeps wanting to get back together with her. My dad is actually in love with this woman. He adores her. He does everything for her. He's super affectionate with her, loves to take her out on dates, gives her so much of his time, and she still doesn't appreciate it. I've always been closer to my dad than my mom. My mom's always trying to find an excuse to go party with her friends, but now I know why. Like I said, I ended up borrowing her phone and she probably didn't expect me to go snooping. And honestly, it wasn't even my intention. I'm scrolling on her phone and I see the app Tinder. I nearly fell out of my seat. So I quickly scrolled through everything and started taking pictures. My mom was sending nudes to random men. Part 2 is up. I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother. That's when I saw that she was sending nudes to men on different apps. Not only was she on Tinder, she was also on Bumble and an app for older people. Mind you, my father is still in love with this woman. I managed to take pictures of everything on the apps. Here's the worst part. Start going through her messages and that's when I found that she has a boyfriend. At that point, I didn't know how long they'd been together. Now I know that she's been with him for 6 months. So every single time she goes on her weekend trips with her friends, she's actually with her boyfriend. And get this, she uses my dad's money to pay for everything. An entire week passed before I confronted her. First, I didn't know how to confront her, but I had to just do it. Every time I saw my dad, I would start to cry and he was worried about me. I didn't have the heart to tell my dad until I confronted my mom. I went up to her and I showed her all the receipts I had. Then she got pissed at me for looking through her phone. By the way, at this point, I'm still living with my parents. That's when she threatened to kick me out of the house if I told my dad anything. My own mother threatening me. Then she tried to smack me across the face, so I smacked her. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother? After she slapped me, I slapped her back. And I slapped her so hard she actually fell on the floor. I instantly felt bad and tried to apologize. That's when she started to cry and I started to cry. I asked her to just be honest with me and tell me the truth. She told me that she wasn't in love with my dad anymore, but that she felt bad for him because he was still in love with her. And that she'd been dating this new guy for 6 months. She even confessed that she was addicted to going on dating apps and flirting with men. That's when I told her she needed to tell my dad. That she needed to stop using his money to take her boyfriend out. Then another confession. She had spent over $25,000
$1,000 on hotels that she would book for her and her new boyfriend. And apparently this guy was broke. He couldn't pay for himself. She tried to negotiate with me. If I don't tell my dad, she'd break up with her boyfriend and stop using the apps. I mean, she's my mother and I don't want to cause her pain, but it's my dad. I ended up telling her that I wouldn't tell my dad. But 2 nights ago, my dad went on a work trip. My mom is so stupid she actually snuck in her boyfriend through her window. I heard them doing the dirty all night. Now she's begging me again not to tell my dad. I'm planning on telling my dad tonight. I'll have to keep you guys updated. Give me advice.
Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2. Story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. As soon as I opened the door, he asked me if he could kiss me, and I didn't say anything. And he grabbed me and just started kissing me. Of course, I pushed him away and told him that he needed to leave. That's when he said, "But you didn't say no." I told him I didn't say anything because I was shocked he would even ask me that. That's when he walked into the house without me inviting him, went straight to the fridge and opened up a beer. Then he starts yelling at me for giving him mixed signals. He says that since my husband died, all I've been doing is flirting with him. Since when is grieving flirting? I told him that he was completely wrong and that he needed to leave again. Then he said, "No, I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth." That I was secretly in love with him and that I actually wanted to be with him. No, this wasn't funny to me at all. He was slurring his words and barely could stand up. I knew my kids were upstairs, so all I wanted to do was get him out of the house. That's when I grabbed my phone and started texting one of my other husband's best friends. I texted him 911, please come to our house now. He responded right away saying, "I'm coming over." After another minute of this guy ranting at me, I told him I was sorry for giving him mixed signals and that was never my intention, blah, blah, blah. Then he asked me out on a date. He said that he wanted to take me out and show me a good time. I said no, and I asked him to leave again, but he wouldn't. Finally, someone knocks on the door. Part 3 is story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. That's when he asked me out on a date and started walking closer to me. Finally, someone knocked on the door, and it was my other husband's friend who I texted to come help me. I ran over to the door quickly and I opened it. That's when my husband's best friend, who was drunk in my house asking me out on a date, forcing me to kiss him, tells the other guy that he needs to leave. So I asked the other friend if he could just take this guy home. He said, yeah, of course. And he told him, "You're drunk. I'm gonna take you home now." They left together without incident and I was really relieved. But after that, I knew to watch my back now. So here's what happened. He started texting me every now and then asking me if I wanted to go to dinner. And I would not even respond to him. And after that, he started showing up to different places I was at. For example, I go to Pilates classes 5 times a week. This place is near my house. And one day he just showed up trying to take a class. As soon as I saw him, I told the instructor and they kicked him out. That's when he came back and said that he did nothing wrong and that he deserved to be in the class too. He even paid the year up front. So they had no choice but to let him in. Instead, I left. Then he followed me outside to the parking lot and told me that I needed to relax. Said, "It's not like I'm following you," which he clearly was. I got in my car and left. That very same night, he sent me a message apologizing for acting crazy. Then he told me that all he wanted was just to be close to me and the kids. By the way, my kids really do love him. They ask about him all the time since he stopped coming over, and I don't even know what to tell them. After a few weeks of him not acting crazy, he asked me if he could come over and I said yes. Decided to invite all my husband's friends and we had a nice dinner. But again, this guy asked me out. I said no, but my best friend thinks I should give him a shot. He's good looking and rich. What do you guys think?